I'm proud and honored to be included with this group of inductees to the Disability Rights Hall of Fame. It saddens me to think that fellow inductee Edith Prentice, with whom I've worked side by side on so many advocacy issues, will be unable to enjoy this honor. My first job as a lawyer was working with Paul Hearn, my friend since teenage years, who had osteogenesis imperfecta. We got a grant to open a legal services office that was architecturally accessible to poor people with physical disabilities. We expected to be handling landlord-tenant, domestic relations, and benefits disputes. And we did. But in the door came huge systemic problems. Denials of housing, employment, transportation, education, extensions of credit, and admission to places of public accommodation, even those run by government, were the norm. Paul said to me in '77, "You do transportation, I'll do employment." He said it as if we actually could accomplish something. In '79, I went to work in a division of Governor Carey's office. Our office in the World Trade Center hosted a meeting of disability advocates. My boss told me off in front of Vietnam-era paralyzed veteran Terry Moakley, a Hall of Fame inductee of a few years ago, for taking the side of people with disabilities. Terry followed me to the men's room and asked if I was happy with the new job. The next day, I got an offer from Eastern Paralyzed Veterans Association, now called United Spinal Association, where I've worked for the past 42 years. In '79, EPVA sued MTA to make buses and subways accessible. No newspaper editorial board supported us. MTA, in its motion to dismiss our case, argued that it does not post signs that say no handicapped allowed, and it permits people to crawl onto buses and trains if they have to. No liability, they said, because non-discrimination required only passive behavior. We argued the state's non-discrimination law required that when MTA bought buses or built or renovated stations, they had to buy, build, and renovate accessibly. That is, in a non-discriminatory manner. Not merely continue business as usual if the state's non-discrimination mandate meant anything. In '84, we settled. And in '88, we settled with Philadelphia's transit system. We got lifts on buses, paratransit, and at least key rail stations to be made accessible in the two oldest, largest rail systems in the United States. Lots of smaller discrimination cases came our way. A singles dance wouldn't sell tickets to a wheelchair user. A public pool denied admission to a resident when the only requirement for admission was residency because she used a wheelchair. A college charged a dorm student double because his wheelchair took up too much room. A Central Park West co-op wouldn't allow a resident to pay for a ramp because her neighbors didn't want the building to look like a hospital. The disability rights community, including disabled Vietnam veterans, kept pushing. And in '88, the Americans with Disabilities Act was introduced for the first time. George H.W. Bush was campaigning for president, supporting the ADA, which would have to be reintroduced during the next Congress. The ADA gave me a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work with advocates from all over the U.S. with varying disabilities in one coordinated effort to educate Congresspeople and their staffs about the history of isolation, segregation, and discrimination endured by those with disabilities in the United States. Advocacy efforts created a national collective consciousness of the needs and rights of people with disabilities. New York City's curb ramps, accessible taxis, and developing an ADA consulting service for the community, architects, and developers became important post-ADA responsibilities for United Spinal and me. 18 years ago, EPVA became United Spinal Association, now a 58,000-member national organization with 50 chapters and a presence on Capitol Hill. Leading United Spinal Association as CEO for the past 7 years has been a privilege and an honor. Thank you to NYSILC, to all my fellow advocates, and to everyone who has made an effort to accommodate people with disabilities.